I was in Davos recently, I was nearly run over by Christine Lagarde. She was in the process of assessing Africa's economic growth rates because the IMF says that Sub-Saharan Africa is going to see a slowdown. Coupled with a precarious energy situation in South Africa and many countries, of course, oil-producing countries in Africa dependent on high oil, should you be investing in South African companies seeking growth north of the Limpopo? This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight I ask two money managers, good ones, Nick Crail, portfolio manager at Ashburton Investments, and Vestact's Sasha Naryshkine, if they'll put their own money into companies expanding into other parts of Africa. It's been a theme for the last 10 years. The Davos theme this year was all about Africa investment. Americans who 10 years ago would never have looked at the African continent are suddenly interested. Everyone is suddenly interested, but has the theme run its course, Nick Crail?
So it hasn't run its course. And everyone is interested. I mean, it's pretty much the last frontier. You've got consumers there abounding, consumers that aren't spending much money, but ultimately at some point in the not so distant future, they should be spending that money.
But this is the part that always gets me befuddled.
Yes.
This assumption that this population, which is going to exceed the size of China by 2050, is going to be affluent. Where is the affluence going to come from to support this allegedly upwardly mobile continent?
So I think it's more a feature of scale. So you just have the population that's there, you have a lack of infrastructure, but you have largely with this global village, and we'll maybe unpack that, but I mean with telcos sort of infrastructure into the rest of Africa, a lot of those guys are starting to participate in the world and economy as a whole. It's a matter of scale. Are you going to be buying all the Cartier watches in the world are coming from Africa sales, and I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. Is every African going to be as affluent as that? And I'm not sure that's the case.
General Electric will sell more light bulbs. General Electric will sell more washing machines and dishwashers into the future. Sasha, is that a view that you subscribe to?
Bruce, I'm an expert on this. I've lived in Africa my whole life. And there is an Africa in front of South Africa. So that's why I think as South African investors, we often forget. But I've lived in Zimbabwe, I've lived in Mozambique, I even lived in Lesotho for a little bit. And none of those countries, till I was kicked out, none of these countries are the same. And there are more languages, I think, in Africa than the rest of the world combined. I mean, in China, 92.5% or 93% of the population are Han Chinese. So there are no ethnic issues. In South Korea, I think it's 99.5% of people are South Korean. So everyone wakes up every morning, has shared the same culture for thousands of years. There's no problem around, those people they're just looking to steal my cattle or whatever, those kind of long tribal issues. But at the end of the day, everybody wants the same things. They want a cell phone connection, they want better food, they want better medication. And if you read the Bill and Melinda Gates letter this year specifically, it's probably more encouraging for the future of Africa than ever before.
What do they say?
Well, they're basically saying infant mortality rates will continue to drop precipitously. But look out for people who are going to provide agricultural solutions. So when you're talking about GE, maybe take a couple of steps back and think of people like maybe Monsanto, or even closer to home, local fertilizer producers. Look at Omnia, who've got a pretty big business across the continent already. So they're saying good things about the continent and a lot of the groundwork that's been made. But don't discount how much work democracy would take in engineering and economic, I wouldn't say miracle.
But democracy is a crucial building block for any economic growth story. I mean, we see democratization of the African continent the last 10 years be better than the 10 years before and better than the 10 years before that. So something is working and working very differently. Now, there are no unit trusts that ordinary people can buy that give you the great Africa exposure, well, not many anyway.
Of course there are.
Hey, come on.
Of course
like
there are.
What?
Like the
Ashburton
African
Fund.
Equity Fund. There we go. So
what's in it?
There are. So those are going to be African listed on African exchanges companies.
Are going to be. So
what's the overall size of the fund and what are the limitations?
Well, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily limitations. Your biggest risks to it, however, are obviously you need financial markets to be there, and you've got in the size of Africa and in the markets that we've got, you've only got a couple of players that are going to be at a sizable enough size. So you're going to have a fair amount of Egypt in there, you're going to have a fair amount of Nigeria in there, you've got a fair amount of, I suppose, more SADC type of countries as well. I definitely think, I mean, if you look at the returns, you are getting that exposure.
What's the
to
performance
Africa.
like over the last couple of years?
It's been very good. So upward, I actually can't tell you off the top of my
Okay,
top of the
I
thing,
know,
but I
I
will
mean,
say
it's
that it beat
an
all
ambush.
sort of South African equity kind of funds in the last year.
Okay, should we be buying in Nick's Africa fund, or should we be creating a portfolio of South African companies, Sasha and Naryshkine, that have got the Africa exposure? So we chuck in the MTN and ShopRite and put in a Metropolitan or an MMI and a Standard Bank and a Barclays
More
Africa.
increasingly, I guess, businesses like Nampak too, businesses like Tiger Brands. I mean, these are all, ironically, you need a better infrastructure in order to be able to, so you'll find a lot of the coastal stuff will continue to do better. But also because Africa can, urbanize probably at a quicker rate because we have land at our disposal, you'll probably find the infrastructure hiccups don't necessarily need to be addressed quickly. Maybe in some of the bigger landlocked countries like the DRC. Now there is an amazing opportunity for so many countries, and we forgot Vodacom out of it.
Absolutely.
We do have a business in the DRC. But I think Nick's onto something. You know, I mean, in my personal capacity, I've owned a few Nigerian stocks, which hasn't been good lately. But, I mean, has been good since we've owned them, about 4 odd years. So I think at the end of the day, it's about people having a look at capital markets. And if you used it on like a balloon type basis, you'd see South Africa and then the rest. So that has to change. That has to change over time.
It's complicated enough for private investors, though, to buy shares in America or to buy shares in England. I mean, in terms of offshore, taking money out of the country, understanding markets and all that sort of stuff. So you either want a fund manager to do it for you, or Greece. Yeah. Well, Greece is easy. You can like stand at the corner and people are giving them away. But you've got a situation for South African investors. Either you go the unit trust route, or you build your own portfolio of South African companies that you understand really well with great growth potential.
Your biggest issue, I think, if you have a look at it at the moment, is that the theme itself is an excellent theme, and I think over an extended period of time is definitely going to play out. So you can be excited with that theme. However, there's a lot of issues, I think, that need to sort of come before it really becomes meaningful in the majority of South African companies' lives. Yeah. So if you have a look at the majority of South African companies, you go to these presentations, they talk about their next leg of growth.
It makes 10% of revenue, it's huge.
It's exactly, it's all about Africa expansion and growth, and it sounds fantastic, but you have a look at what's driving the share price, because it's such a relatively minor percentage of both revenue but also of earnings, it's not really the driver at the moment. That's not to say that at some point it's not going to become that, but it certainly isn't right now. So it is quite tough, I think, playing it from a South African perspective, looking at South African companies, because there's only a few. MTN does come to mind, where it is going to generate the majority of its revenues and earnings outside of South Africa.
Yeah. It already does. Yeah.
Exactly, it already does. But if you have a look at other guys, the retailers,
but that story's done,
etc., it's
or not.
What? Cellular?
MTN.
Oh no, Bruce, there are hardly any fixed lines on this continent.
MTN's biggest fan, by the way. So
second biggest.
Oh, okay, fine. Oh boy, the MTN
third
Appreciation
biggest.
Society.
Why are you wearing a blue tie? Where's your yellow?
So MTN's a good way in. What else would you put into a South African portfolio to take advantage of an Africa expansion story?
Yeah.
Give me 5 shares between you.
5.
MTN.
5.
Maybe that's
MTN.
Yes.
MTN.
You can only buy MTN once.
Oh, only one. Oh yeah, I guess ShopRite.
Okay.
Although I mean, in large part, they're still opening the majority of their stores here.
Correct.
But just a reminder, Bruce, that if you take the South out of South Africa, it's Africa. Come on. I mean, these are all African consumers.
So exactly, you got ShopRite, you got Mr. Price. I think both of those have they have the potential going forward to be significant players in an African space. However, understand at the moment they're not.
No, but that's not the point.
So
it's
future.
We're looking to capitalize from
Brands.
an African future.
Tiger Brands is another good option.
Okay, and I need
maybe
one.
as an outside one, maybe Nampak. I don't know.
Nampak. I'm not sure I like the fundamentals of the company Nampak, in the sense that you're a bit of a price taker because of the size, opposed to the price setter. Similar, I suppose, to Illovo. So Illovo is another one that generates a large amount of its revenues already outside of Africa.
How about we put money into agriculture and we go to Zeder or we go to Omnia?
Maybe Omnia is a better bet.
Okay. I mean, you talked to Yanni Mouton about Zeder, and he's got big Pan-African plans for Zeder.
And we're a semi-arid country, so there are lots of other countries that have got bigger potential.
It's easier to grow stuff in many other parts of the
world.
world.
I mean, in the middle of Mozambique, when it's not raining cats and dogs, you can stick your thumb in the ground and another finger will grow out.
I've heard this. This is true. I wondered what had happened. So there is a Pan-African growth story, but it's a story of patience. It's a story of time. And if you are looking to build a portfolio of South African shares to capitalize on outside of the country, we're happy with MTN, Shoprite, Mr. Price, Tiger Brands, and Omnia. It's nice, nice diversified spread, not a bank.
I mean, look, Standard Bank has the biggest exposure at the moment. I think it's something they'll look into, but there's lots of regulatory challenges
in each territory.
If Kitso Gordon was here 6 months ago, he would have chosen PPC. No, you're not taking that. No, okay.
Not really. No.
There are lots of very good regional players.
But that's it. Okay, so give me another regional player that isn't listed on the JSE.
Well, Dangote Cement is, Bamburi Cement in East Africa. Zambeef. I mean, there's potentially a good investment if you're willing to go all the way to Zambia.
With falling copper prices, with an economy dependent on copper, you buy into a Zambian beef story?
Yeah, it's more regional.
Okay, so more of a regional exporter.
Yeah.
It's not a very nice comment to say. You're taking him out by the knees here.
Well,
it's his job.
That's my job. Okay, just wait till I get started with you, Nick Crail. Absolutely not. And then one looks at multinational companies, American multinationals. There've got to be some really good bets there as well.
Bruce, if I read it correctly, less than 2% of all the revenues generated by the S&P 500 companies come from Africa. Less than 2%. So, gee, I mean, even if you look in Apple's results, I mean, that's sparkling. How much? Oh, we didn't even feature.
Yeah, so it's sold 3 mobile phones in Sandton City, and that's contributing.
And the queue was 5 long.
So I think that's the point. There's a lot of those players that will definitely take a lot of market share. However, that market share to them is going to be immaterial. I mean, it'll be a nice 1 or 2%, up on earnings at some point in the future, but it's not really going to be a driver of the share price. So
I mean, even look
at
really
why you
Walmart, Massmart, it gets a mention, and it's like, oh, is that it? Yeah.
It's negligible. Absolutely right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Nice to see you both. Thank you for coming in. My thanks to my guests, Sasha Naryshkine from Vestact and Nick Crail, who's a portfolio manager at Ashburton Investments. And yes, they've got a unit trust you can buy to give you the exposure, which you can otherwise build with a little mini portfolio we built this evening of the likes of MTN, Shoprite, Mr. Price, Tiger Brands, and Omnia. If you want to go regional, Zambeef and Dangote Cement have been mentioned this evening as well. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow. Till then, good night.